So, if you all are ready, I think we're going to get started. I'm going to start off and introduce each of us. The three of us will be facilitating. My name is Connie Deering, and I am the coordinator of the grants for the external funding or the external agency funding for community services.
I'm Rebecca DeJarnett. I'm the coordinator for the Office of Youth Development and the EAF Youth Grants coordinator for the Office of Resilience and Community Services.
Good morning, and I'm Audrey Cotton. I'm the arts administrator for I'm the arts coordinator for the external agency funding arts grant.
Okay, I want to welcome you all to the training, and I want to thank you all for your interest in this external agency funding. It's important, and we do want to remind you to hold all questions until the end. We will give you plenty of time to take care of that. We're going to go over the strategic goals for the Office of Resilience and Community Services. We're going to go over the strategic goals for the arts and creative industries, and then we're going to do an overview of the complete application process. If you are viewing this orientation online, then please be sure to watch the entire video, because at the end of the presentation today, there will be several questions that will need to be answered. Very important questions, and this will be, the questions that are answered will be sent to the external agency funding email address, and we'll give you that at the end of this session today. All right, so let's get started. External agency funding is a competitive process, and there are no guarantees that your agency will be funded just because you fill out an application. We realize that you all think that your agency and your program is important to the community services, but it definitely is important. I do want to tell you that, but that doesn't mean, and just remember that it doesn't mean you will be funded. There's a panel process that takes place, and the facilitators here are not the judges of who does and who does not get the money. Last year, we received applications for the external agency fund in the amount of $6 million. That's how much money was requested throughout the nonprofit community, which is, it's a lot of money. You think about it, like 180 applications we received on the Resilience and Community Services side, and I think on the arts side it was between 75 and 80. So if you think about that, that's a lot of money. However, when the budget rolls around from the mayor and Metro Council, we were only allotted $1.3 million. So if you take that small amount compared to the money that was requested, it's astronomical. So please know that your program and your agency is important, but keep in mind, just because you do an application does not mean you're going to be funded. Now, it's vitally important that you submit the best application that you can. One of the ways to do so is to follow the instructions on the guidelines that you will be able to download off of the website. Well, Rebecca's got the guidelines over here. I only have two hands. This is what it will look like when you download it. We cannot express how important it is to follow these guidelines. It will take you through every question. You will see all the questions numbered, and beside each of those numbers on the guidelines, it will tell you how to answer that question. So before you think you have this dire question that needs to be answered, you might just quickly find it faster in the guidelines. That's how important that we have made those. So we strongly urge you to go ahead, download those and print them out. That will help you tremendously. And next, I'm going to talk about the strategic goals for Office of Resilience and Community Services. We strive to decrease homelessness. We try to increase household financial stability, increasing youth, teen, and/or youth adults engagement in quality programming, and increasing access to services and resources for a targeted population. We need those.
So I forgot to tell you in the beginning that the arts and creative industries comes out of Louisville Forward, and our strategic plans are as follows. Arts experiences for everyone, creative workforce, and creative community spaces and neighborhoods. These are our strategic goals.
Okay, back to me. Now, just want to remind you also that the deadline to file your application is February the 8th, which is a Friday, at 5 p.m. Please remember that we fund only programs. We do not fund agencies. So remember, you're filing this application for your agency, but it is for your specific program that you want funding for. If you would like to, if you have like a second or third program, you just need to email the email address that I'm going to give you in just a little bit and ask for a second link or a third link. However, if you have 4 programs, we'll give you 3 other links, but you'll get just one off of the website. Okay, I want to remind you too that external agency funds are not intended for health organizations, no child care centers, no support groups, or no startup groups. I'm going to read you the process of the application. For the Office of Resilience and Community Services, the applications must provide one of the following services: workforce development and job training, household stability, health and wellness, safe neighborhoods, out-of-school time quality programming for youth, teens, and/or young adults. These services must also fall within the mayor's and also the Office of Resilience and Community Services strategic goals.
Applicants for the arts and creative industries should be qualified nonprofits who are committed to providing programs that achieve meaningful outcomes for Louisville citizens in the arts and creative industries. The focus areas previously mentioned for arts and creative industries funding program are based on the goals of Mayor Fisher's strategic plan.
For your application, each of the staff members here, the 3 of us, will be doing pre-checks before these are presented to the panel process. Now, you must be sure that your agency is registered and in good standing with the Kentucky Secretary of State. Must also be registered in good standing with the Jefferson County Revenue Commission. Must be an IRS 501c3 tax-exempt organization. And you must be in good standing with all departments of the Louisville Metro government. That would be departments such as neighborhood development funding from Metro Council. It would also be safe and healthy neighborhoods for their little mini grants. So if you're non-compliant with any of those agencies throughout or now during this application season, you better get straight with them, because it's going to be, we check with all of them and we keep in touch. So if you would happen to be non-compliant with us, they can't send you any of the funding that has been awarded you, and vice versa. So keep in mind, you got to be in good standing with all of these above, and your services must be provided within Jefferson County. Okay, for your request limitation, all combined funding from Metro government cannot exceed 25% of the applicant's agency or organization's total cash budget. Cannot exceed 85% of the total program budget. I'll give you an example. If your total agency budget is $100,000, then the maximum amount that you could ask for from Louisville Metro government would be, total request would be $25,000. And likewise, if the total program budget for the program that you are requesting funds for is $25,000, then the maximum amount you can request for the program would be $21,250. Okay, next we have a list of unallowable expenses or costs that you cannot use Metro dollars for, that you may be awarded for. This is not the complete list. The full and complete list will be on those guidelines that I spoke about earlier that will tell you all of it. We often have several applications that ask for things that are on the list that are not allowed. That's going to kick your application out. So please, 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 please read the guidelines. That's how important it is. There are also separate guidelines for the arts and creative industries as well. Those are also being on the website. They're not the same. Resilience and community services, different guidelines, very similar, but not specific. So if you are doing arts and creative agents or industries, then you need to follow their guidelines and their unallowable cost.
All right, so you've heard a lot of facts, a lot of stuff about some of the things that are the background information about our grants. So within the external agency process grants, what is it that we're really looking for? What is it that we're looking for you to provide to us in order for us to be able to approve your funding for fiscal year 20? And that sounds so crazy to say that we're gonna, this funding will start on June 1st, 2019 and end on, no, it starts on July 1st. Let me get that straight. July 1st, 2019, and ends on June 30th, 2020. So, what is it that we're looking for? We're looking for to make sure that the programs that you are providing are actually services that are needed within our community. The mayor has provided these funds within his budget for the last several years, at least the 20 years I've been with Metro government. I know that these funds have been in the budget. To help support services that Metro can't provide that are needed in our community. A lot of cities don't provide this type of funding, so we're very fortunate here in Louisville that our mayor does include this in the budget every year. But as Connie said earlier, there is no guarantee that this money will continue to always be in the budget. So one of the things that we're looking for are to make sure that whatever you're doing also expands our goals for our separate departments, as well as the goals for the mayor in his strategic plan. We also want to make sure that you're not working in a silo, that you're working together. Because we know that there are many, many, many organizations out there doing wonderful things for the citizens of our community to help them with whatever it is that they need. But we want to make sure that you all are working together, that you're working collaboratively. And we're not talking about the fact that somebody's just making a referral to you. That's not necessarily a collaboration. We're talking about actually partnering and working together and sharing resources. That's what collaboration is all about. So that's one of the things that we're looking for. So then the other thing is we want to make sure that because this is taxpayer dollars, your taxpayer dollars as well as mine, that are going into this fund, that we want to make sure that the clients that we're serving are predominantly in Jefferson County. The only part of the fund, if you fund clients that are inside and outside of Jefferson County, you can only use our funding to provide the services for those that live in Jefferson County. That's really important. And then we also want to make sure that you have measurable outcomes. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute because we really, really, really want to make sure this year that we have measurable outcomes, that we can actually tell the mayor and Metro Council what the outcomes are for the external agency fund. Right now, we're allowing people to kind of just pick and choose and kind of have your own outcomes. And this year it's going to be a little different for resilience and community services. Now, remember, as Connie said, there are two different applications. There's one application for arts and creative industry, and they have their own separate set of guidelines. And then there's a separate, similar but different application for resilience and community services that has its own separate set of guidelines. So you need to make sure that you're clicking on the right application for what it is that you want to apply for when you go to the web page to get that link. So, one of the first things you're going to be asked when you look at the application is whether or not you're a new funded program or you're requesting funds for a continuation program. Now, a lot of times people get confused on exactly what that means because when they see the word continuation, they think, well, my program's been going on for a long time, so it's a continuation. In actuality, what we mean by that is if you're a continuation, if you click continuation, that means you are currently, today, getting funding through the EAF process for the program that you are requesting funds for. Then you would click continuation. If you are not, as of today, getting any funding for EAF for the program that you are requesting funds for, you would be a new program. Now, here's where the numbers may get a little different for you, because if you are a continuation program, the logic in the community services grant will take you to another page that you have to answer additional questions about the current funding that you're receiving and the program that you're receiving it for. So you'll have 3 questions that you have to answer about the funding you're currently getting, and then you can move on to the next part of the application. So, this is a real big thing this year. The mayor is very interested in us looking at SMART goals. So this year we're asking that all of your goals and outcomes are SMART. Does everybody know what SMART means? Most of you do. SMART actually means that the outcomes are very specific, they're measurable, they're attainable, they're relevant, and they're timely. So, let's talk about an example. You know, here we are at the beginning of the new year, and a lot of people probably made New Year's resolutions. A lot of people probably made New Year's resolutions about losing weight or getting healthier. How many of y'all did? Anybody? Several of us did? I did. So for example, if I told you that my outcome for fiscal year 2019, or calendar year 2019, was that I wanted to lose weight, is that a SMART outcome for me for this year?
Not specific.
It's not specific. It's really not measurable. It's probably attainable, since I didn't tell you what it was I was going to do other than lose weight. Is it relevant? Well, I didn't tell you why I wanted to lose weight, so it may not be relevant. And it's not, but it is timely, because I told you when I was going to do it. So what could I do to that outcome to make it a SMART outcome? Anybody have an idea?
Make it specific by saying how many pounds you want to lose.
Make it specific by saying exactly how many pounds I wanted to lose. What else? That would make it measurable also.
How you might go about losing the weight.
How I might go about losing the weight. And relevant as to why. Do what? Somebody in the back?
I was going to say, set a time.
A time frame? Okay. So what if I said something like this? If I said, I have to find where I wrote it down. I wrote it down here somewhere. Let me find it. So what if I said, in the next 6 months, I'm going to lose 50 pounds to be healthier? Is that smart?
It's better.
It's better, but it's not quite. It's specific. It told you what I was going to do. It's measurable, because I told you within 6 months and how much I was going to lose. Is it attainable? Probably. Maybe. Maybe not. 50 pounds sounds like an awful lot for 6 months. So what about, over the course of 2019, I'm going to exercise and eat better so that I can lose 15 pounds. Smart? Is it specific? Is it measurable? Is it attainable? Is it relevant? Is it timely? Those are the kind of things that we're looking for in your application. You will be asked to provide outcomes, and the outcomes that we're asking you to project for your program for next year must be SMART. So this year, one of the things that the Office of Resilience and Community Services is doing a little differently is that when it comes to your outcomes, you're going to ask to choose from the 4 primary focus areas that Connie talked about in the beginning that are part of our focus areas, part of our strategic plan. Once you pick that area, then you will also, it will use logic to take you to another page that will actually give you more things to pick from. So, I'm going to use for example, if you pick decreasing homelessness as your primary focus area, when you went to the next page, you would have certain things to choose from. Those things might be something like, I'm going to reduce foreclosures or evictions. I'm going to provide supportive services and case management for the homeless. I'm going to provide emergency shelter and or meals for the homeless. I'm going to provide housing counseling to the homeless or those that are at risk of being homeless. So then you would need to pick one of those, and you can only pick one. And then once you pick that one, then your outcomes would have to be addressing that specific targeted outcome area. Does that make sense to everybody? Can we save our questions till the end? Because there is a time to ask questions. If you'll write it down, it would really help us, because we're really going to try, because we're recording this session, we would prefer that we waited till the end to ask questions. Okay? Is that all right? Okay. So here's an example. So let's say that I picked decreasing homelessness. So let's say that once I picked that I also picked that I was going to reduce foreclosures or evictions. So how would I write a SMART goal that would address that? An example might be, during fiscal year 2020, XYZ program will provide legal assistance to 25 households that are at risk of foreclosure, and we will document the results of each of those cases. Is that a SMART outcome? You have to have at least one, but you can have up to 3 outcomes for each of those. If you have questions when you're writing this, you can send your questions into the EAF mailbox so that we can help you with those questions as best we can. We can't write them for you, but we can help you to make sure that you're moving in the right direction. So, the next big part of your application is the budget. And the budget this year is also a little different for resilience and community services. One of the things that we're asking in addition this year in the budget is that you provide a budget narrative. So you're going to have to actually write a paragraph about how you came up with the figures that you came up with in your budget. So if you write down in your budget that you're going to buy $250 worth of program expenses, you got to tell us how you came up with that. Not only do you have to tell us what that means as far as what are the program expenses that you're going to be using that money for, but you also got to tell us how you came up with that. So we want you to be a little more specific. The panel has requested this because we have a panel of citizens that come in. There's usually 12 to 13 of them, and then 1 or 2 people from Metro Council that read the grants. And a lot of times they're people that don't know anything about what you're doing. And so they oftentimes want to make sure that their questions that they ask us a lot of times is, do the items in the budget really relate to the program description that you gave? You know, so there's lots of questions about that when it comes to the panel and the things that they're looking for.
Okay, and as you can see up here now is that famous website. It is www.logalky.gov/EAF. We'll keep this up so you'll have time to write it down. Or you can just go to the logalky.gov website and just queue up EAF, and eventually you'll get to it. But if you have the specific, it'll take you right there. The second bullet is the email address at EAF@logalky.gov. This is where you will receive your additional links if you need them for a second, third, or fourth program that you will be applying for. This is also, this is also where you get your guidelines at the logalky.gov/EAF. So this is very, very important. Does everybody have it before we move on? Okay.
It's me again. So, I'm going to talk a little bit now about actually how the panel scores. So, as I said, we have a panel of community citizens that make up this panel, and they are each asked to read. Like last year, we actually got 155 applications, and we had 12 panel members. So each panel member was asked to read at least 50 applications so that each application could be read a minimum of 4 times. Now, another change for this year as far as that is concerned, as far as scoring is concerned, is that Metro Council has also requested that this year, each of you that submit an application will be receiving an email once the mayor's budget is released. The mayor's budget is generally released in late April. So when the mayor's budget is released, then each of you will receive an email that will tell you whether or not you were recommended for funding and for how much. Or it will tell you that you were not recommended for funding, and it will give you a checklist of things for reasons, things you scored low on, reasons possibly why you weren't recommended for funding. As Connie said, last year we had over $6 million in requests, and we could only provide $1.3 million in recommendations. So those things are important to remember when you're actually working on this application. Now, to kind of give you an idea about some things here that they're looking at, the panel will be looking at these areas that are in your application, and I'm going to tell you how many points you get for each area. So, at the beginning where it says review threshold, there are no points for that. That's what the staff review is. The staff will be reviewing your application to make sure that it says it's complete. It will say it's complete on our side if it lights up green. If it's incomplete, it will be yellow, which means that if it's incomplete, it will not be passed on to the panel. So in order to make sure that your application is complete, be sure at the end of your application you hit the submit button. Very important, hit the submit button. Now, one of the problems with our application, and we know this, is that it's very hard for you all to print it out. I know that's an issue. But if you want to print it out, there are directions in the guidelines about how to do it. You have to hit the previous button at the bottom in order to go back to the beginning and to print each page individually. Now, after it's done, after the process is done, if you want a copy, you can request a copy from us. We can't provide copies of your applications until after the mayor's budget has been released. But if you want a copy at that time, you can request it and we can make sure that you have it. Now, so the staff will be looking to make sure that it's complete. We will be checking to make sure that you attended the mandatory orientation or that you viewed it online. If you attended in person, like today, you will be signing an attestation sheet before you leave today. That will be the documentation that we use to show that you attended today. If you are viewing it online, at the end of this presentation, there are some questions. Those questions are not the same questions as we asked last year. They're different. So you will have to watch the entire video because the answers to the questions are at the beginning and the middle and at the end of the video. So you will be sure to watch the entire video so that you can answer the questions so that when you submit the answers to the questions to the EAF mailbox, you'll get credit for the mandatory orientation. And then we also will check to make sure that your organization is in compliance with all the things Connie talked about earlier with the Kentucky Secretary of State. We'll just go online and make sure it says you're in good standing. Revenue Commission will just go online and make sure that you're in good standing. Metro government will be checking with all the other departments that provide funding to make sure that you're in good standing. So those are the things that staff will be doing in advance, and there are no points awarded for that. Now, once the panel gets it, they will get a note that says whether or not you met that threshold. Then they will be looking at your program description. Your program description is worth 15 points. Those 15 points are very important because they want to make sure that you are giving a complete and accurate description of exactly what it is you're doing and where you're doing it and how you're doing it. It's very important for the panel for them to understand because not all of them are aware of all of the programs in the community and all the things that are happening, and they want to be able to understand exactly what it is that the program you're requesting funding for is going to be doing in the community. The second part is program outcomes. They must be SMART outcomes, and you get 25 points. So be sure they're SMART outcomes because that's really important. Budget information, 25 points. We want to make sure that your budget is accurate. We want to make sure that a lot of times one of the things that we find in the budgets is that the math is incorrect. So we want to make sure, you want to make sure that the math between all the different questions that ask about the budget, that all of that adds up to the correct item. That you haven't requested more than 25% of your total agency budget, that you haven't requested more than 85% of the total program budget, so that way you want to make sure that that part of the budget is correct. Collaboration. Collaboration is worth 10 points. We want to make sure that, as I said before, you're not working in a silo, that people are working together to provide services to our community. We want to make sure that we're showing compassion to all of our citizens and that all of our citizens are receiving the necessary services that they need. So you need to collaborate with others because there's lots of other people out there that are doing wonderful things with and for our citizens just like you are. For sustainability. You know, sustainability is something that's really important because Metro funds may not always be available. So the panel wants to know, how are you going to keep this program going if the EAF funds go away? That's worth 15 points. Community need. It's really important that you tell us there's a need for your program in our community, and it's a good idea to back that up with data. You can get 10 points for your community need question. And there's only one question about community need. But you want to make sure that you're very descriptive about what the need is, why there's a need, and use data or any kind of documentation or stories or whatever that you can within the word limits to make sure that you've expressed why there's a need for your program in our community. Now, once the panel members have all read the grants, they submit their individual score sheets with these scores to us, to staff. We then take each of those individual score sheets and we put them on a master spreadsheet so that if your grant, your application was read 4 times, you'll have 4 different scores. And then those scores are averaged, okay? So that helps if you got one real high one and one real low one, it kind of puts you in the middle. So you'll get an average score. That is the total score that will be reported to you. You will not get the 4 individual scores. You will only get your average score. That's the score that you will receive. That's also the score that the panel looks at. When the panel meets at their big meeting, sometimes it's 1 day, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 3, depending on what the panel wants to do, they meet and they discuss the grants. The spreadsheet that they are given when they arrive for that meeting has all of the applications listed in order of their scores, from highest to lowest. One of the first things the panel does is determine what is a cutoff score, which means what's the median score that's kind of their cutoff, where anybody that scored below that score will not be discussed, which means that we have to use their score sheets to determine what were the reasons why that particular application got such a low score. So, then they have to decide based on the amount of money that we're told that we can recommend to the mayor during the budget. Last year it was 1.3. We're hoping it's going to be 1.3 again this year. Then they decide how much funding each application is going to be given. So if you ask for $20,000 for your program, you may not get $20,000. You may get less than that. Because there's a limited amount of funding available, they do sometimes have to give you less than what you actually asked for. Recommendations then go to the mayor's office and are then included in the mayor's budget, which comes out, like I said, at the end of April. And when that budget comes out, it'll be then time for it to go to Metro Council. And you will receive your letter at that same time before Metro Council starts having any of their open budget hearings. And you'll get information about that. So, once again, just a reminder, the deadline is set up to be February 8th, 2019 at 5 p.m. At 5 p.m., the online application will close. You will not be able to submit anything after 5 p.m. And that's 5 p.m. the computer's time. You know, sometimes our watches are all a little different. Mine might say 5:01, yours might say 4:48 or something. Whatever the computer says is the time, is when it'll shut it off at 5 p.m. So,